For 10 millennia, one word has defined the Alpha Legion: traitor. They were the last legion to join the Imperium, the most mysterious, and the first many loyalists blamed when the galaxy caught fire. From sabotage on Istvan to silent uprisings across 1,000 worlds, the 20th became a curse whispered in the dark. They are the template for every traitor cell, every insurrection, every false flag. That's the story the Imperium repeats. That's the story Games Workshop usually writes. But with the Alpha Legion, nothing is ever that simple, because buried under propaganda, redacted reports, and official accounts, there lies another possibility. A darker, colder, far more complicated interpretation. One where every betrayal is an asset, every atrocity is a tactic, and every apparent fall to chaos was part of a plan the galaxy was never meant to understand. In this video, we're making the case that the Alpha Legion might not be the Imperium's greatest traitors, but its most extreme loyalists. A legion that chose eternal damnation, public hatred, and total erasure over obedience, glory, and medals. This isn't a redemption story. This is a conspiracy. A theory about a sacrifice so complete, so ruthless, that it has taken 10,000 years to even recognize it. According to Imperial history, the matter is settled. The Alpha Legion sided with Horus. They ambushed loyalists at the Drop Site Massacre. They spread terror across the Imperium. Case closed. The 20th Legion were the Imperium's covert operations specialists. Sabotage, misinformation, psychological warfare. When they turned, they weaponized every trick they had spent decades perfecting. They blocked communications. They infiltrated command structures. They destabilized entire sectors before vanishing like ghosts. To the High Lords, the Inquisition, and the Administratum, the Alpha Legion isn't just a traitor legion. They are the reason the galaxy can never be trusted. But the thing about the Alpha Legion is simple. If you think you understand their motives, you probably don't. Because the deeper you go into their story, the more the simple narrative falls apart. The 20th were presented with a decision no other legion faced. A choice that, if true, would reframe the entire heresy. To see it, we need to return to a single meeting in the shadows. One Primarch, one alien conspiracy, one prophecy that may, or may not, have been true. The infamous confrontation with the Cabal. In Dan Abnett's Legion, Alfarius encounters a Xenos coalition called the Cabal, an ancient group united by a single goal, the destruction of chaos. They present him with two visions. The Alpha Legion stays loyal, Horus falls. The Emperor survives only as a corpse god on the Golden Throne. Humanity becomes stagnant, fanatical, and oppressive. Chaos feeds on the Imperium's misery for millennia until everything is consumed. Second vision, the Alpha Legion joins Horus. Horus wins. He kills the Emperor, and in his grief and corruption, he unleashes a purge that wipes out humanity in a handful of generations. Without humans, the Chaos Gods starve, wither, and die. Two futures, both terrible, both mechanistic, both suspicious. The Cabal demanded a choice: sacrifice humanity to save the galaxy, or save humanity and doom everything else. But the Alpha Legion are not obedient soldiers. They are manipulators, planners, skeptics. If any Primarch was likely to reject a binary prophecy from manipulative Xenos, it was Alfarius. And this leads us to the heart of the conspiracy. What if the Alpha Legion chose a third option? To infiltrate Horus, sabotage him from within, and drag the heresy into a timeline the Cabal could not predict. A future where humanity survives, and chaos is weakened in ways no one expected. If that was the plan, then everything the Alpha Legion has done since begins to look different. Imperial records often claim the Alpha Legion's gene seed was unstable or prone to mutation. But this instability is inconsistent, poorly documented, and suspiciously convenient for an Imperium that wants to frame the 20th as inherently flawed. Meanwhile, earlier sources describe the opposite. The Alpha Legion used disguise and biological mimicry as weapons. They employed operatives who altered their appearance or physiology for infiltration. They ran experiments the administratum never fully understood. Is it mutation? Is it deliberate? Is it misdirection? We don't know, and the Imperium definitely doesn't know. What is clear is this. If the Alpha Legion's gene seed was truly catastrophically corrupted, they would not have remained one of the most intact forces after the heresy. Their widespread infiltration, sleeper cells, and sustained numbers contradict the broken gene seed narrative. So either the flaws were exaggerated, or someone wanted them to look flawed. One of the clearest examples of Alpha Legion ambiguity appears when Horus orders them to recruit or eliminate the White Scars. What happens? The Alpha Legion blockades them, harasses them, interferes with their astropathic communication. It looks like typical traitor behavior, until it suddenly isn't. Because a mysterious sabotage event cripples the very jamming array that's blocking messages from Terra, and the moment that array is destroyed, Jagatai Khan receives critical loyalist intelligence from Rogel Dorn. After that, the Khan chooses the Emperor's side. If the Alpha Legion were loyal traitors, the mission was a failure. If they were secret loyalists, they succeeded brilliantly. They pushed the White Scars just far enough to force the Khan to reject Horus, and then conveniently allowed Dorn's message to reach him. Coincidence? Incompetence? Or reverse psychology on a Legion-wide scale? Before the Siege of Terra, the Alpha Legion penetrated the most secure location in the galaxy, the Imperial Palace. They infiltrated deep, mapped vulnerabilities, walked the halls unseen, and then, critically, they revealed their presence. They destroyed a statue, left a message, vanished. If they truly wanted the throne to fall, that intelligence would have been priceless to Horus. Instead, they scared Rogel Dorn so badly that he initiated sweeping reforms and hardened the palace's defenses. Some sources describe the aftermath as the precursor to the Custodes' blood games, internal infiltration drills designed to continually expose weaknesses. Would a loyalist legion infiltrate Terra? Absolutely. Would a traitor legion give up the prize of a lifetime just to make a point? Absolutely not. Unless the point was the mission. After the heresy, Alfarius allegedly dies at Eskrador by Guilliman's hand. Except, the account is second-hand. The Inquisitor who recorded the story is later accused of heresy. Guilliman never directly confirms the kill. Omegon's fate is even more mysterious. And then there's the bombshell from Dan Abnett's Bequin trilogy. A mysterious operative, Death Row, tells Eisenhorn's allies, "I am Alfarius." An Emperor's Children Marine slashes his face, pauses, and says, "That's not possible," right before dying. Chaos veterans do not freeze at the sight of a random Alpha Legionnaire. They freeze when confronted with something impossible. The conclusion many readers draw? At least one Primarch of the 20th may still be alive. If Eskrador was a staged death, it might have been the single greatest disappearing act in Imperial history, allowing Alfarius or Omegon to operate from the shadows without the burden of a Primarch's notoriety. After Horus died, most traitor legions shattered. The World Eaters imploded into chaos-worshipping berserkers. The Death Guard became diseased horrors bound to Nurgle. The Emperor's Children devolved into decadent nightmares. But the Alpha Legion? They didn't break. They scattered deliberately, compartmentalized, went dark, went silent. They did not unite to destroy the wounded Imperium, even though they arguably had the best chance of any traitor legion to do so. Instead, their actions become often anti-chaos, often anti-imperial, often impossible to categorize. They become something else, a faction with a mission only they seem to understand. Restraint is not the behavior of a Chaos Legion, it's the behavior of a faction waiting, watching, correcting the timeline one cut at a time. And now we reach the modern era, the 42nd millennium. Enter Hero Master Solomon Akurra, one of the most dangerous Alpha Legion commanders in recent lore. He isn't trying to drag the Legion deeper into chaos. He isn't serving a dark god. He's trying to reunite the 20th Legion. He seeks the Pale Spear, a relic tied to Alfarius. Not for worship, not for chaos ascension, but as a symbol, something that can rally the Legion and restore its shape. This isn't the behavior of a warband consumed by mutation or corruption. It's the behavior of a military force preparing for something. And with the Ghost Legion, the Pillar of Dreams on the horizon, we may be witnessing the beginning of the Alpha Legion's next phase: unification, consolidation, and emergence. Which raises the central question of this entire theory. If the Alpha Legion have been playing the long game for 10,000 years, what happens when they finally decide to reveal their hand? So let's review the evidence. A prophecy the Alpha Legion may have deliberately subverted, gene seed flaws that don't match observed reality, actions that pushed loyalists toward the throne, an infiltration that strengthened Imperial defenses, a Primarch whose death is extremely uncertain, a Legion that refused to destroy the Imperium when it was weakest, modern attempts at reunification with no Chaos allegiance. This doesn't look like the pattern of opportunistic traitors. It looks like a Legion fighting a secret war, a war so ruthless that only the Alpha Legion could fight it. But the truth is fractured. Many warbands have absolutely fallen to chaos. Others pursue selfish or nihilistic goals. The Legion is not united, and hasn't been for 10,000 years. Yet the possibility remains that somewhere, deep in the shadows, the core of the Legion still follows the original mission. Not loyal to the Imperium as it is, but loyal to humanity as it must become. On every official record, they are traitors. But if you follow their actions instead of their reputation, a different story emerges. A conspiracy to save the human species from its enemies, its gods, its empire, and even from itself. What's your verdict? After 10,000 years of deception, redactions, and contradictory lore, are the Alpha Legion the most loyal traitors in the galaxy? Or have they simply lost themselves in a maze of their own lies? Drop your answer in the comments. And if the Alpha Legion truly tricked the galaxy, what does that make Guilliman, Dorn, and Malcador, the victims of the biggest deception in Imperial history? If you enjoy forbidden lore, buried conspiracies, and the kind of theories the Inquisition would purge your data slate for, subscribe, hit the bell, and remember, in the grim dark future, nothing is ever what it seems. Thanks for watching.
The Council approves this video. Subscribe now!